Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us today to talk about an exciting new grant, um, pilot grant that we are introducing here at Leo. Very excited about an opportunity that we have to really help demonstrate to landlords um, the benefit of renting to justice involved individuals. My name is Kim Trent. I am the Deputy Director for Prosperity for the Michigan Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity. Within the Prosperity team, we have the Michigan Poverty Task Force, which is a body that was established by Governor Whitmer in 2019. In 2020, we pulled together 14 of the state's department directors with the intention of creating policy to lower Michigan's ALICE rate. And ALICE is the metric that we use to determine financial stability. So we are we have issued two reports with recommendations, actually three reports, two reports that had recommendations about strategies to lower costs for low-income Michiganders, as well as increase their income. And we also issued a third report working with the University of Kansas about that took a look at where we are with our TANF program here in Michigan and different things that we can do to improve it. We're again here today to talk to you about an exciting new grant program that we are introducing that Sophie Ordway, who's going to be talking a little bit later, is going to give you the details on. But I want to take a moment to really express my deep appreciation to the Michigan Justice Fund for their contribution to this grant. In addition to, we really try to work collaboratively, not just in state government. We are not trying to be siloed. We work with philanthropy. We work with practitioners and we work with people with lived experience. We were very grateful to have the support of MJF for this pilot. And again, Sophie will tell you a little bit more about their involvement, but this, I think, aligns very well with the work that they do. I'm now going to turn the program over to Sophie Ordway, who has just been a phenomenal fellow with us with the University of Michigan's Youth Policy Lab, working on issues to try to open up pathways to jobs for justice-involved individuals. And she has been our lead on this grant program. So Sophie, take it away.
Thank you, Kim, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for everyone who joined us today. Like Kim said, my name is Sophie Ordway. I'm the Data and Policy Fellow from University of Michigan's Youth Policy Lab, working with the Michigan Poverty Task Force and the Prosperity Division at Leo with Kim and all the other good folks. I'm very excited to be sharing this grant opportunity with you all today. I'm going to spend the first part of the webinar. Thanks, Denise. I'm going to spend the first part of the webinar talking about the grant opportunities, going into a little bit of detail about the housing pilot RFP, as well as an evaluator RFP that we've posted. And then I'm going to hand it off to Michael, who will go over how to use the eGrams portal, which is what you'll use to apply for the grant. And after that, we will have some time to take questions. As questions come up for you, sorry, could you go? Thanks. As questions come up for you, please do try to use the Q&A function to submit them rather than the chat. We will try to keep our eye on the chat, but it's much easier for questions to kind of get lost in the shuffle if they're in the chat. So if you can, please try to use the Q&A. Any questions that we don't have time to get to or are unable to answer today, we will follow up with a FAQ document, which will be posted on the website. And just to talk about my agenda for the grant opportunities, I'm going to start going over with important dates, and then I'll give some background information on how these grant opportunities came about, eligibility requirements, what we're looking for from applicants, allowable uses for the incentive dollars, the scope of services, and then again, I'll also briefly talk about the a separate RFP for a third-party evaluation of the pilot. Okay, so now you can go to next slide. Thanks, Denise. So before jumping into all that, we do want to strongly encourage everyone to create a profile with eGrams as soon as possible and get familiar with the portal. As I said, Michael's going to go over how to do that in the second half of this webinar. And the Leo Grants team will be available to provide technical assistance when you're filling out the application, but there is definitely a learning curve with using eGrams, and we think it will be in your best interest to make sure you're not trying to fill out the application and trying to figure out how to use eGrams all at the same time. Next slide, please. Okay, so important dates to remember. I think the biggest one that we want to highlight for everyone right now is the deadline, which is May 16th. We would like all applications to be submitted in eGrams by 3 o'clock in the afternoon that day. We are hoping to we're hoping to notify grant awardees by June 13th, and the grant period will officially start on July 1st. The housing pilot grant will go through January 31st, 2027, and the evaluator grant will start at that same time, but will have a couple of extra months to finalize their report. Next slide, please. And before I jump into the details of the grant itself, I want to give a little bit of context for why and how we designed the RFP the way that we did. I think many of us on this call probably know that affordable and good quality housing is a huge issue for Michiganders living in poverty and anyone in the ALICE population. There's ample research that shows how important it is to have stable housing in order to have economic mobility for a variety of reasons, and this is especially true for the justice-involved population. National data shows that formerly incarcerated folks are 10 times more likely to be technically homeless compared to the general public, and we think that that number probably jumps even higher when we include people who are not technically homeless but are still housing insecure, so people without stable housing who are often living in hotels or temporary housing or family members' couches. We also know that landlord discrimination against justice-involved individuals still exists. There are studies that show that landlords are more likely to rent to someone without a criminal record when given that option. And there's plenty of anecdotal evidence here in Michigan from organizations led by directly impacted folks, advocates, and direct service providers that housing discrimination is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, barrier to economic prosperity for justice-involved individuals. And I also want to highlight that there is research out there that shows that people with criminal records are generally no more likely to actually be riskier tenants compared to other low-income folks in the general public. So to help address this barrier, as Kim mentioned, the Poverty Task Force has already put out 2 iterations of a Poverty Task Force report. And in those last 2 iterations, we've had a recommendation to implement a landlord risk mitigation fund. This type of fund works similarly to fidelity bonding, how fidelity bonding works for employers, in that it can provide a type of liability insurance, which can sometimes act as an incentive to rent to what landlords think of as riskier tenants. Last fall, Deputy Director Trent and the Prosperity Division was given a budget appropriation to pilot a new program, and we decided to focus on looking into what creating or implementing a risk mitigation fund would actually look like as a pilot in 1 or 2 communities, especially since we were getting ready to add that as a recommendation for a 3rd time in the upcoming report. So we had a lot of conversations with stakeholders throughout the fall, including housing organizations, directly impacted individuals and the organizations they lead, and other direct service providers, as well as researchers. And the 2 big takeaways from those conversations were that while risk mitigation funds can be useful in some situations, they're not always the best option for incentivizing landlords in every context, and that it's really helpful for service providers to have some flexibility in how they use financial incentives and support. So next slide, please. So those conversations and a lot of the research that we did led us to develop this RFP for the Housing Access for Justice-Involved Individuals grant. We will be awarding up to 2 grants for separate pilots that will range from $200,000 to $400,000 each. Ideally, we would like one of those pilots to be in an urban community and in the other in a rural community so that we can compare incentive uses in different contexts. And as Kim mentioned, A big thanks goes to Michigan Justice Fund for contributing $300,000 total to this project. 200 of that is going towards these housing pilots themselves, and that's why we'll be able to fund 2 separate pilots instead of just one. So without Michigan Justice Fund, we wouldn't have the scope that we currently have for this project. The RFP will ask grant applicants to propose how exactly they want to use those incentive dollars to increase housing access by bringing in new landlords to rent to justice-involved individuals. So these would be landlords in their communities that have not previously rented to justice-involved individuals. We do give suggested incentive dollar uses, and which I'm going to go over in a few slides, but ultimately, the incentive design is going to be up to the grantee with certain parameters, of course. So there's a limit on how much can be used for each individual, which I'll also go over, and it needs to be used to directly support housing. Ultimately, the money does go to the landlord, which is why we're calling it an incentive, but in other ways, it's also a big support for the justice-involved individual themselves. The grant does include an education component for both the landlord and the tenant, which I'll also talk about a little bit more later. And it also includes a 12-month follow-up period during which the grantee will, we expect the grantee to maintain a relationship with both the tenant and the landlord to support that successful housing placement. And then we've also posted a much smaller RFP for $100,000 to contract a third-party evaluator to help us learn as much as we can from this pilot program. I'll talk about that a little bit more towards the end, but again, a big thank you and shout out to the Michigan Justice Fund, part of the Community Foundation for Southeast Michigan, for their contribution, without which we would not be able to put out this second RFP to contract a third-party evaluator. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the overarching goal for this pilot is, I would say, obviously to increase housing access for justice-involved individuals. But I think that the secondary goals may be even more important, as they will help us shape future policy as we continue to try to increase housing access for justice-involved individuals. We know that people who are closest to the issues are often the most knowledgeable about what solutions work best, and by allowing grantees to propose their own incentive design and then test it out, we'll learn more about what types of incentives really work with landlords to increase housing for this population and how that may differ between 2 different communities. With this knowledge about best practices for landlord incentives, we can increase the portfolio of landlords who are willing to rent to justice-involved individuals across the state, hopefully in the long term, and provide evidence and support of why it makes sense to rent to this population. With the help, of course, from a contracted evaluator, we'll be looking at the housing and program outcomes, but we're also hoping to look at the impact this program has on recidivism and other economic mobility indicators like employment. With the increased portfolio of landlords in this program, we're hoping we can spotlight at least 1 or 2, if not more, stories from landlords and the tenants themselves that participated in the program and what they gained from it to help spread the word across the state to other landlords and property owners that renting to justice-involved individuals is actually a really good thing, not just for them, but for the economy as a whole. Next slide, please. So to go over the scope of services, the grantees are going to be asked to recruit and vet both landlords and tenants or justice-involved individuals to participate in this program. This should include the educational component that we want to be centered around debunking myths around justice-involved individuals as risky tenants, but also increases financial and fair housing literacy among tenants and fair housing law information among landlords. The grant also includes, like I mentioned, a 12-month post-placement retention period to provide services that support successful housing placement, and this will again involve maintaining a relationship with both the landlord and the tenant, and that relationship can definitely incorporate services from community partners. So we would like to see in your application how you intend to work with community partners to support a successful housing placement in that retention period. The big one that comes to mind is working with employment service providers as a community partner. but there are obviously a lot of other service providers that are relevant too. We want to see that this retention period is built into your work plan and your grant application based on the number of participants that you plan to recruit and their housing placement date. And then, of course, we also expect grantees to have regular check-ins with the Prosperity Grant Administrator and provide monthly progress and financial reports and work with that contracted third-party evaluator to help aid a successful pilot evaluation. Next slide, please. In terms of what we're looking for, we definitely want to see applicants that have experience working with this population, with justice-involved individuals, and ideally also have experience providing housing assistance and placement. We'd like to see a detailed plan of how the grant applicants plan to use that financial incentive and how they will fulfill the scope of services that are listed and explained in detail in the RFP. And we want successful applicants we think will demonstrate that there is a need for increased housing access for justice-involved individuals in their community, and also are able to provide commitment from at least one or two partner organizations that are able to provide support services to their program participants. And then, of course, all applications should include a budget. Next slide, please. As far as allowable incentives go, this is a list of suggested incentive uses, and this list is included in the RFP, but we're definitely also interested in seeing what other uses applicants can come up with in terms of any alternatives or what they think would work best in their community. These suggestions are a one-time sign-on bonus for the landlord, which should be capped. You could provide the landlords access to a risk mitigation fund. You could pay in whole or in part the first month's rent and security deposit for your program participants. You could pay rent on an emergency basis in the event that unexpected costs arise for the program participant, or you could do some combination of all of these. Or again, there may be something that we haven't thought of that you know would work better for your program participants. The incentive dollars do need to be capped at $4,000 per justice-involved individual, and a sign-on bonus or something similar does need to be capped at $1,200. Those amounts can be smaller. They don't have to be that high, which may make sense for your community and the amount of program participants that you want to serve. We'll want to see in your application an explanation for how you decided upon the specific incentive uses that you plan for and the dollar amount per person. Next slide, please. As far as what is not allowed, here is a list of everything that you are not able to use the incentive dollars for. This list is also in the RFP if you need to refer back to it. Essentially, the thing to remember is that the incentives can only be used to supplement rent payments or direct incentive payments to the landlord. Ultimately, the money does go to the landlord. Again, that's why we're calling it an incentive. So unfortunately, no direct payments to the justice-involved individual that are not rent payments. And then the list here is pretty standard in terms of what state funds cannot be used for through grant dollars. Next slide, please. Thank you. So eligible grant applicants definitely include academic entities, research entities, and think tanks, foundations, economic development corporations, nonprofits, and community-based organizations. If you're uncertain about whether or not you're eligible, please don't hesitate to ask. You are allowed to subcontract services if that makes sense for you and your community. You'll just need to provide a detailed plan for that in your grant application and the proposed budget. Next slide, please. As far as program participants, the potential program participants who need housing must have a criminal record and a demonstrated need for that housing. So there are no restrictions based on conviction type, but we do want to emphasize that the grantee will need to be aware of and willing to work with applicants who may have certain conviction-based housing restrictions or parole-based housing restrictions. So that's something that we want to know that the grant applicant is aware of, that they'll need to, talk with each program participant about, just to make sure that they don't have housing restrictions. The justice-involved individuals also do not need to be considered technically homeless, which I think is a national definition. They don't need to be technically homeless to be eligible, but they do need to be in pursuit of their own housing. So in other words, the incentive payments cannot be used to help someone maintain their current housing. This is because one of the biggest goals for this pilot program is to expose and bring in new landlords to the benefits of housing justice-involved individuals, right? We want to increase that portfolio of landlords that have not otherwise or have not previously rented to this population. We also are asking that program participants, justice-involved individuals, do have proof of sustainable income before they're housed. The incentive payments are clearly not going to be enough to pay for a full year's worth of rent. So because the grant period is 19 months long, we're hoping that this gives the grantee about 6 months to recruit and vet applicants for the program before all applicants are expected to be housed and that 12-month follow-up period begins. This could mean that there's a participant that you're working with who may not have sustainable income in your first month of the grant, but by the time they're able to get housed, they either have a job or they have some form of sustainable income and can show proof of that. So part of the expectation, again, is that we're hoping grantees will work with partner organizations to set these program participants up for success as much as possible. So helping them find that sustainable income employment could be something that one of your partner organizations does. And then, of course, we do want all of the justice-involved individuals to be within the service area that you propose in your grant application. As far as landlords, any landlord that wants to participate in this program must comply with state and local housing laws, including providing proof of ownership and complying with local housing codes. We know that the quality of housing, particularly for this population, can be an issue. So we'd love to hear from applicants that have experience ensuring that housing is in good condition and that what their plan is to vet eligible landlords to make sure that they're in compliance with local and state housing codes and they're not setting people up in unsafe housing conditions. Landlords must also be willing to receive some form of education on the importance of housing justice-involved individuals, information that debunks myths around this population, and fair housing laws. This education can either be provided by the grantee directly or through a partner organization, and the form of the education is up to the grantee to propose in their application. We also expect that landlords are able to maintain contact with the grantee throughout the duration of the grant, not only to ensure successful housing placement, but also to aid in that grant evaluation process and sharing of success stories. Next slide, please. So to talk about the evaluator RFP, just for a couple slides, the RFP for the evaluator grant has also been posted on the same webpage. And it will be $100,000 to one evaluator who we would like to evaluate both pilots. The goal, excuse me, the goal of the evaluation is to gain an analytical understanding of the impact that financial incentives can have on economic outcomes for justice-involved individuals, such as housing stability, landlord engagement, recidivism, and employment. We expect that the evaluator grant period to start at the same time as the housing pilot to help ensure effective data collection and for the evaluator to really understand the pilot implementation. Next slide, please. We do want to note or highlight that the application for the evaluator RFP is not submitted through eGrams, but rather just sent to us via email in Word or PDF format. All of the details for where to send that and how to submit that application, what to include, are linked on the Housing Access for Justice Involved Individuals webpage, which will drop again in the chat. You just need to scroll down to the bottom of that page to find those links. To give you a brief overview, the application should include the evaluator's business organization and history, their plan to implement the required scope of services, their competency and experience to execute an evaluation, and a proposed budget. We do expect that the evaluator application will include some proposed methodology or methodologies for their evaluation, but ultimately what we'd like to see is that the evaluation design is decided upon in partnership with the housing pilot service providers to ensure that it works well for everyone involved. And this is another reason why we want the evaluator grant to start at the same time as the housing pilot grant, so that there can be discussion in the first couple of months of the planning period about what type of evaluation design will work best. Next slide, please. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Michael to talk about eGrams. Again, please put any questions you have in the Q&A or the chat, and we'll try to answer them as best we can when we get to the question section. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie. My name is Michael Tiffany. I work in the Michigan Leo grants team, kind of the eGrams experts with regard to RFPs and grants that run through that particular software. So we're going to go through the RFP process, setting up user accounts, give you some helpful email and phone numbers for our help desk, which we are on every day from 8 till 4:30. And we'll get started. You can put any questions that you have in the chat. And are we going to do a live question and answer after this? Okay. So we'll get started. All right, so you'll navigate to the front page of the eGrams. Make sure that you're navigating to the Leo eGrams. There are two. If you want to know where you are, just to make sure, the upper left-hand corner will say Labor and Economic Opportunity. If it says Health and Human Services, you're in the wrong place. Some of you may already have DHHS accounts. Those will not work for this. Just treat them as two separate businesses, two separate entities, and make sure that you go to the MI Leo eGrams. On that very front page, over on the right-hand side, you'll see something that says See Current Grants. If you click on that, it will navigate you to the open grants for application at the current time and give you kind of a brief overview on that first part. As far as the timeline, total grant amount, the submission dates. If you click, in this case, it'll be the HAJII. Click on that one. It will take you to some more information, some general information. And then your best friend in this right now is going to be the User Documents tab. Clicking on User Documents will take you to all the pertinent information that you'll need. This includes the very first steps that you're going to need to take, which is registering your agency, or at least checking to see if your agency has been registered in the MI Leo eGrams, creating user accounts, assigning people to grants, this PowerPoint, and we will be updating any pertinent information with the RFP document about this grant as it changes, as it often does. And then you'll have contact information in here as well in some of the PowerPoints, in all of the instructionals, if you need to get a hold of us for anything. Some warnings about eGrams. Never use the back button. If you want to lose what you've started and you haven't saved, your easiest way to do that is to hit back or refresh. eGrams doesn't like it. You also have a running clock when you're in eGrams. Starts at 20 minutes and it will get down to the 2-minute mark. It'll give you if you haven't done anything, if you haven't saved, navigated to another page, haven't done any actual action for a while in eGrams, that clock will run down to 2 minutes. It'll give you a warning asking you if you want to stay alive in eGrams. If you miss that, walk away from your desk and come back. It'll log you out and you will lose anything you have not saved. So remember to save your work. Remember to watch your timer. It's easy to get lost in the time when you're working on an extensive application. So just be cognizant of that. You want to validate your workstation. So if you've never used the eGrams site before, make sure you validate your workstations and that. So I'll refer to these 3 line boxes in the eGrams app or eGrams software as hamburger buttons, just what we call them. That upper right-hand corner hamburger button on the front page, validate workstation. You want to do that because it will make sure that you're using an applicable browser. Microsoft Edge is the most efficient, the browser with the least amount of headaches. Mac products don't work well. Firefox works pretty well. So Firefox and Edge, if you can help it, would be the two that you really want to use. Otherwise, we just see problems. Excuse me. You'll also want to make sure that you have pop-ups enabled. eGrams uses pop-ups. And if you get all green check marks, you're good to go. If you are having some trouble with it, get a hold of us. We'll help you walk through that. Okay, so first thing you'll want to do once you've validated your workstation, gotten to the eGrams website, checked everything out, is to register your agency. Over on the right-hand side, the verify your agency registration. I always recommend to do that first because what we've seen is a lot of duplicate agencies that can have slightly varying information, or you've just got two of the same agency, and then you've got one of your agency profiles tied to grants and then some other agency profiles tied to other grants, and it can get confusing. It's recommended that have you use the one agency and then have all the users, the people that work for your agency, tied to just the one agency profile and then assigned within the system to the grants that you're going to be working with. So if you haven't already registered an agency, then you'll want to do that. Fill in the federal ID number, agency name, legal name if it's different. All the information on this front page, if you can absolutely help it. If you don't know what your unique identity identifier is, that can be retrieved on the sam.gov website. We can help you with that as well. The vendor reference number is your SGMA number. It's how you're going to get paid. So you're going to want to do that. The agency type in the bottom right-hand corner is important because if you're applying for certain grants, certain agency types can be limited as far as who's allowed to apply to certain grants and who's not. So you want to be specific about the type of agency that you are. If you don't see your agency type, you can get a hold of us and we'll help you figure out what the best choice is. All right, so I've already talked about some of these things. Actually, all of those things. We'll move to the next one. So in the second tab, the contacts tab, that contact person for your agency, it doesn't have to be someone necessarily high ranking in your agency, just a contact who's easy to get a hold of, who can answer questions about your agency if need be, who has the authority to change that information if need be. So make sure we have a good email and phone number for them. On the last tab, most grants are going to require a primary county where you operate. So please make sure that that gets selected. That can cause error messages that can sometimes just be an afterthought when trying to relieve an issue. So try to be thorough in creating your agency profile. That would be the last thing you need to do. Next thing you'll do is create a user profile. So that's right on that front page. Click on create user profile. Fill out your username. Know that it can't be changed. Once you've created the profile, we cannot change your user profile name. You're stuck with it, or you can just make another one and let this one just hang out in eGrams forever. In anything you do, your username, your password, don't use special characters. I know that's contradictory to most of today's password requests, but eGrams doesn't like it. So just letters, numbers, uppercase, lowercase, that's all you really need in this system. The biggest error that we see, and it's very simple, but I'm probably going to say this multiple times. I hope that I do. When you're creating your profile, in the role code, select grantee. Don't select anything other than grantee. Don't select grantor, reviewer, anything. Grantee is the only thing that you'll want to select, even if it doesn't seem logical. If you do not select grantee, you will not be able to find your parent agency in the parent agency lookup. Then you'll select something else that's incorrect, and you won't be able to start an application for your agency. You won't be able to be assigned to your agency. It is the number one mistake that we see, and I know that it seems really easy, but you'll get in there and you'll forget that I said that and not follow the instructions, and then we'll have to fix it for you. It happens every day, dozens of times a day. So if you can prevent that right there, you'll be on your way starting the application much faster. So the agency should populate, your address should populate based on your agency information. If you work at a different site, you can change that. The phone number button, so this is slightly changed. We need to make an update to this. Over on the right-hand side, the phone number and the email now has been changed to accommodate people who have multiple phone numbers. So you're going to see a blue plus sign next to those. If you have multiple phone numbers, multiple emails, or if you just have one, you need to click on the blue plus sign to include your phone number and your email. It's a simple change, but we've kind of trained people to just fill in the white boxes, the content boxes, and now it's been changed to a blue plus sign. So we'll make sure to get these instructions updated. If you have any questions about that, just email the help desk or give us a call. In the additional information tab, that's the second tab on the create user profile. The designation title, the best thing I can say about this is it really doesn't matter. Fill in the title that in the choices that best applies to what your title is. If it's not perfect, it really doesn't matter. The county should match unless you work in a different county than your organization's primary county, but that's fine. Just give us an idea of the county that you work in. The photo, unnecessary. The signature, unnecessary. The security questions are extremely necessary. So pick the 2 security questions that you'll best remember. The answers are case sensitive. Try to make them easy and memorable or write them down somewhere. This is what you're going to use. If you forget your password, you'll go into that front page, log in, and click forgot password. It will ask you for your username, and then the security questions will automatically populate based on that username. You select or you write in your security answers, and then you can change your password. If you forget what these are, then you'll need to get a hold of us. Notice that our help desk email is in this one because it's a really popular help desk topic. So if you've forgotten your password, or you haven't been in eGrams for a few weeks, or you have too many attempts and you get kicked out and you've been switched to inactive, email us and we'll give you a hand on all of those things. So they do expire every 90 days. I've seen them expire faster than that, just based on inactivity. So again, if you want to change your password, that assumes that you know your password and you just want to change it. The forgot your password option, that second one, that's where you don't know what it is, put in your username, and then those security questions will come up. Provide your security answers and you can change your password. Remember, no special characters. So again, changing the password, this one's pretty easy. Again, a reminder on the special characters, it will just, you can literally use your password with special characters and it will not recognize it and then make you inactive. Don't know why it does it. It just does. So we just try to advise people not to use them. And then the forgot password, you can see what happens. So we blanked out the username in this case, but it does populate those questions and then gives you a chance to select your new password on there. Give us an email or a call if you want help with that. We're happy to help. Okay, so it doesn't say that here. Before we start the application, once you've created a user profile, your status immediately goes to inactive. And the reason it does that is it forces us to take a look at it. If you want to be quickly activated, give us an email. It says, hey, I just created a profile. Can you please review it and activate me? That forces us to go in and look at it and make sure that you've set it up correctly. The first thing we're going to do is see that you've selected grantee and that you've been tied to the correct agency. And if you've not done that, then we'll switch it over for you to make sure that you're assigned to the right agency. We will then activate your profile, and then you can start this next step. So starting the application, if you're the person that's going to start the application for your agency, know that once you've done this step, you default to what we call the project director. So you'll go to project director and start a new application. These little caret signs point to the right, or greater than signs pointing to the right. It's going to be the first drop down and then the second drop down, or just kind of leading you down the drop downs in the eGrams. And that's starting from that top dark blue bar and then working your way down from there. So once you've gotten to start a new application, you'll select the grant program, in this case, the HAJII. Your agency should pre-populate for you since you've been correctly assigned to your agency. Make sure that it does and that we haven't accidentally, or you haven't accidentally assigned yourself to the wrong agency. And so you'll select the proper program, click OK. If the program doesn't appear on the list, reach out to us. We'll help you get to where you need to go. Only one person at your agency needs to start this application. Again, you become the project director. We'll talk about the project director in a couple of minutes, or right now. There's two different things. We'll talk about this a couple of times. There's two different places where people's names will appear in eGrams in certain roles. On the contract itself, and those are the names that will appear on the legally binding agreement. Those are just kind of cursory those are the names you want to see on the agreement. They don't perform any functional work in eGrams once you have an actual agreement with us. Those are just names that you want to appear on the agreement. Those are names that people, assume the roles that will be assigned, but also put on the agreement. There's another place in eGrams in the assign users to a program that perform actual work. So the first one is this project director. Once you've started the application, you are the project director. That person assigns and unassigns users within the system. You can work on the applications, you can work on reporting, but you cannot submit financial reporting. That role belongs to the financial officer. The financial officer can work on applications, can work on reports, and submits financial reports on behalf of your agency. And the only financial report that we foresee for this program is just the FSR, which is a financial status report. Essentially, that's your invoice. That's how you get paid. The authorized official is a person authorized to submit project applications and sign legally binding agreements on behalf of your agency. So at some point after your project director has started the application, we would really like to see 2 other people who can assume the financial officer and the authorized official roles, go in and create their profiles, ask us for those to get activated, and that you get them assigned to the grant as soon as possible. This step can be forgotten. You can get to the end of that application, and then we get questions like, I can't submit my application. Why can't I? It's because you don't have an authorized official. The name that you've put on that contract, on the applicant tab, is not the person assigned to that role to do functional work. We're going to, again, I'll say this a couple more times just to hopefully drive the point home, that whoever you put on the application is not the person that may be actually doing work. There are some other roles that you can assign people to. Grant writers, they can write in applications. Reviewers that can just be assigned to read-only permissions where they can just look things over for accuracy. And then reports administrators, they can complete and submit non-financial reports, work plan reports, other reports that you see in some other grant programs. So again, and there are the instructions for this specifically in that documents tab in the See Current Grants. Assigning agency users. Once you've had a couple of other users create their profiles, that project director can then go to project director, assign agency users, look up the grant program, click the find button in the bottom right-hand corner, and then you'll see, you should see the names of those people who have created their profiles. It means that they've been appropriately assigned to the agency, and then you can assign them to the roles that they need to be assigned to by selecting that PRMCD or perm code. You'll see that yourself, you've been auto-assigned to the project director role like we've talked about, and then you'll want to assign those other people as needed to the roles that you need to assign them to. We're happy to answer any questions about that. It can get confusing. Only one person needs to be a primary. So over on the right-hand side, that's probably you. Leave it there. It's not very important. It is a little bit confusing in the system if you select that primary button a bunch of times. So just leave it alone is our best advice. Okay, so we have usually activated people when it comes to assigning them first. You can assign them in this screen. So if they haven't yet been assigned, but you do see their name there, you can assign or activate them if you want to. So to assign them, again, click on that hamburger button in the perm code, select their role, click OK to complete the process, and then they're assigned and can do work within eGrams. You can restrict people's access. So if you click in the category, that box with an arrow pointing out of it, it's going to default to giving them the ability to write in all sections of the application. If you want to restrict someone's access, you can go in there and either give them NA, so no access at all, or the readability, which means they can look it over, but they can't actually make changes to the application. This is rare, but if you want to do that and you want some help on it, again, get a hold of us. We'll help you limit people's access. Remember that it's pop-up based in eGrams. So if you've clicked OK in this box, you'll need to click OK after it takes you out of that pop-up to finalize the process. Get used to that. If there's an OK box in a pop-up, you'll want to click OK back on the main screen to make it permanent. You can also remove users. So if someone stops working at your agency, they're no longer working on this project, the project director has the ability to delete users from projects or programs within eGrams. Use the red trash can over on the right-hand side. If you want to just inactivate a user, uncheck their user status, and that'll make them inactive. You could keep them on the screen, just inactivate them. Maybe they're going on leave for a little while, but you want them to resume when they get back. So just click their user status, inactivate them. When they come back, go back in there, click the user status, click OK to complete the process, and they're either assigned or unassigned. Okay, to access the application, so whoever you have assigned, if it's just you, other users, you go to grant application, enter/edit application. So this is when the application's already been started and a little bit of data has been entered in there. Now other people can go in and access it as well. Click on the grant program hamburger button, select the right program. The agency should pre-populate. If it doesn't, let us know, and we'll help make sure that everybody's assigned the way they're supposed to. To get into the application, you can click in these 3 different spots. Anything that's blue, the program name, under the description, or under the submit date, any of those are going to take you right into the application. Once you get into the application, we've broken this down into smaller sections just to kind of review. So the applicant tab, that's the first section of the application. It's going to have the demographics, it's going to have the information about your agency that should pre-populate. Then it'll have some program information, usually dollar amount, timeline, things like that. And then the contacts, and we'll get to that again. Those are just names in the contract application. Then you have the attestation, usually just some generic certifications and assurances that you'll want to read through and select. Applications cannot be submitted without selecting those things. The project overview identifies counties in which services will be provided and some evaluation criteria. The work plan will have objectives, activities, activity contacts, evaluations, and measurements. We'll go over that. Then you'll have your budget, any attachments that you want to include in the application. And then the index is kind of like, just like it's a tool at the end that you can navigate back to the contract to, or you can see error messages that you have in specific sections by going back there. A lot of people don't use it. It's actually pretty useful. The action buttons, which are underneath the tabs we just talked about. So your save button, it's one of your best friends in this thing. If you've done some work, save it. You don't want to lose it. If you've finished a section or finished a page, the save and next will save the current page, move you to the next page in the application. That's really helpful if you're just moving right along. Once you've finished a specific section in the contract, and so by section I mean like the applicant tab that we talked about, or the certifications and the attestations. Once you finish that section, you can validate it for errors. If there are any errors, then that red error tab is going to light up a little bit more red. You click on that and it will give you the errors you've committed in that section and give you some helpful tips to alleviate those errors. If you have an error that either the tip isn't there or it's not very helpful, get a hold of us on help desk and we will help you navigate through and resolve that error. Because this is a competitive grant, we can't help you fill in content with your application, but we can help you fill in pertinent information about your agency, make sure things are in the right place, and then we can help you fix errors throughout the contract. If you finish the entire application, the done button will validate the whole contract. So the only issue with clicking the done button is that you may have an error in a section that you don't quite know how to navigate to. So we recommend starting out by validating each section as you finish it. And then once you finish the whole application, to do a done or a whole contract application validation, and then you should have less errors that way. If you want to see the PDF or how it's going to look with all the questions or all the content for that section, if you click view PDF, it'll show you what the current section looks like, kind of like the on paper version. To view the entire application without attachments, you're going to select that right-hand side PDF in the upper right-hand corner. If you want to see it with attachments, you'll select the left-hand one. It'll show you the whole applications and then anything you've uploaded. The show tree button, I know this is a lot of information. So the only time I would use the show tree, if you want to make a note of this, is when you're in the budget or the work plan. The budget can be pretty extensive to go through if you're using a lot of categories and have a lot of expenses in different areas. So if you click on the show tree button, you can navigate to a specific part of that section and click OK, and then it will take you right to that particular section of the budget or the work plan. The first couple of tabs, it's not really necessary. So it's more clicks than you need to. If you're trying to navigate in throughout this application and you don't need to save, the next button, and then there'll be like a previous button if you get into it. That's how you navigate without saving. Okay, so there are some action buttons now that you can see behind this pop-up on the screen that you have the tabs we were talking about, the applicant and the budget and the attachments, and then underneath you have those green action buttons. There are some other useful things. So there are some program documents in the upper kind of blue banner. And then the show hide instructions is really important during the RFP process. If you expand that or click show hide instructions, it'll give you instructions on how to fill out each section. Gives you tips and tricks of anything that program has decided that was important for you to know, or some things from us on the eGrams team on how to fill out that specific section of the contract. The narrative in the bottom right-hand corner with that little note, that's where you will enter a narrative for that specific section. Okay, so now we're starting all the way back over. Here's what the applicant tab looks like. Again, most of these things should pre-populate: the name, your address, the type of agency, if you filled that out correctly, should populate. Review it, make sure that it's correct. If it's not, we need to change your agency profile to make sure that those things are correct. And then page 2 is that project information. Should have the name of the program, again, the dates, and the amount of funds requested. Those boxes, the funds requested, project cost, those things should correlate to your budget totals. If they don't, you're going to get an error message, and that'll need to be changed. The contacts, you're going to be able to hard key in things that have white boxes. The grayed out boxes are things that you'll select from the hamburger button. And if someone doesn't have an eGrams login, you won't be able to select their name from the lookup button. You'll only be able to hard key their names in. We recommend that you select people that have eGrams profiles, but you don't absolutely have to do that. But like we talked about earlier, these names in this contact section are not people who have been assigned to the grant to do functional work. They are just names that you are including on the application. So if you say so-and-so is an authorized official right here on the contract, and then you ask us why they can't sign the agreement later, it's because you didn't go into the assign users screen and assign them to the agreement so that they could perform functional work in eGrams, if that makes sense, now that we can see the two different screens. Make sure that you click save after you've completed the first contact. When you click next, you can see it's highlighted in red in the upper right hand corner. You click next, it's going to ask you if you want to add a new contact. You're going to want to click yes and make 3 different contacts. So we'll go back to this one. So it should be authorized official, primary, grant contact, and financial officer. Those are the 3 that I think we require you to do on this one. There are a couple others if you want to be super thorough and include other contacts. The attestation tab, again, just clicking this box, certifications, making sure that you're reading through these, and you have to click them, but please read through them before you do, just to understand what these are. If you do not click one of them, you'll get a validation error. You will not be able to submit your application. Project overview, again, you're just selecting the program service area where you're performing services. In the very bottom of this selection, you'll see Wayne versus Outwayne. There have been a couple of grant programs where we needed people to specify if they were in Detroit, out of Wayne County, or in Detroit, in Wayne County. Project overview, give us, there are some questions that are longer. So again, check the show hide instructions. If there's a character limit that's not specified, everything defaults to 5,000 characters. So watch your characters in this. Check the drop downs. If a question looks cut off, there's usually a way to get to it. So show hide instructions there. If you need to upload anything, you'll see a bar with an up arrow that indicates that that's an upload section where you can upload documentation to your application. The work plan, if you have an extensive work plan for this is something you really need to pay attention to. It's kind of a level-based system. So objectives are high level work that's going to be done. Activities are the actual work being done in that objective. So each activity should have its own box. Don't lump them all into one. It's hard to track, and that's why there's a plus and a garbage can there. We'll go over that in a second. The responsible staff, you can put a position or a person's name or both in that box there right in the middle. The timeline indicator, this one's kind of important. So if you select date, then that's only going to give you the exact day that work's being done. That is really rare. You're more likely to select date range, which gives you the time frame in which that work's going to be done by that person or people. If you have expected outcomes to fill out and you do not select outcome applicability, you see right in the middle of the screen highlighted in red, you will get an error message. So if you type anything in that expected outcome box, you need to select the little box next to outcome applicability. You'll get an error message. It'll be hard to track down, but it's easily fixable, but it's easier just to make sure you're selecting the box. The measurements at the bottom just gives you kind of some type of either numeric or, count or some type of measurement for how to measure success within that objective or activity. Once you've finished with an objective and activity and filled out this entire part of it, select save. And if you need to add more objectives, you'll click the plus box for a new objective. If you want to add a new activity under that one objective, you click the plus button on activity and it'll give you a fresh activity box. It'll blank out the responsible staff and everything underneath it. And then you can add more activities to that objective. Remember, click save when you're done with that, and then click the plus sign to add more. When you're done with that objective, you want to add more, then you'll click save, click plus button on the new objective. It'll give you a brand new objective. And you'll see on the left-hand side how it all rolls up. You can go through and delete as you need and add. And if you have questions with that, again, on just the formatting on how that works, email or call the help desk, and we'd be happy to walk you through that. So here's a roll up on all of that again, the plus buttons, the deletes. It will give you a "Are you sure?" question, which is great because if you accidentally click that delete button, it's not just going to automatically go away. You're going to have to confirm that you want to delete it. But most applications have several layers of this, the work being done, multiple activities. So then you head into the budget. The budget tends to flow from left to right with specific budget categories. Again, if you want to you want to skip forward or backwards, the show tree button. So if you click on that, you follow those arrows down to the left. You see where you can go from salaries all the way down to indirect without having to hit the next button 7 or 8 times. You can just click indirect, click the OK button, and then it'll shoot you over to a section of the budget further down. The show hide instructions gives you information on the expenses that should be in the budget category. Some of them are extremely self-explanatory, like salaries and personnel, and then others maybe not so much, like supplies and materials. What specific programs are looking for in that area will be in the show hide instructions. The narrative, that's where you enter the budget narrative for each section or each category in which you have expenses. Failure to fill in narratives will result in errors in most cases. So you'll want to make sure that you're checking or filling that section in. Here's an example of just the kind of cookie cutter budget categories: salaries, fringes, travel, supplies, other, which if you're filling in other, you're going to want to give us a good idea what other is. So we'll talk about how to enter salaries really quick. So in the description, you can type in the title of the position, enter the number of positions and the quantity, the rate, so the salary rate based on 1 FTE. You can also do hourly if you want to. The total column should automatically calculate based on the rate, the quantity, and the units. So in the amount column, that's the amount that you're requiring the grant to pay for. The cash column is going to be like your in-kind or your outside the grant how the rest of it's being paid for. So if you have 60,000 in salary and 50,000 of it's being paid for by this grant, the amount would have 50, and then the cash or in kind would have the other 10. If you're not held to a match requirement in a grant, you don't really have to put the outside payment amount, but if you want to include that, you absolutely can. Make sure that you click save when your work is done here. You don't want to navigate to the next section of the budget and not save your work. You'll have to go back and redo it. And also make sure if you've entered several positions that your totals at the bottom equal what you want them to equal. So for fringes, our recommendation, especially if you're having multiple fringes included, is to use an all composite rate. If you have a composite rate, you have to identify the benefits being listed. If you use an all composite rate, it basically is like, this is what all of our benefit package encompasses. And then you can use the cumulative percentage. Then you want to bring over the salaries that you're using to complete the to compute the fringes with, and make sure that the amount over in the amount column equals what you anticipated for fringe benefits. If it doesn't, you can work the percentages in the units to equal what you want to, as long as it's what you anticipate for fringe costs for this program. Again, remember to save. Quickly through things like budget and travel, if you have those expenses, make sure that you're using a proper description, a proper amount, including anything in the notes that needs to be included, or things in the narrative that need to be included. The show/hide instructions, again, will give you a breakdown of things that might be included, or some tips on how to fill out that specific section. Once you've navigated through the entire budget, you can go right back to the index, and it will show you whether or not the section has been completed. If it has an open green circle, it's not finished yet. If it has a red X, there's an error that needs to be fixed. You can click on that red X. You can go back to the section and validate it. There are a lot of ways for you to check errors and check for completeness. If there's a paperclip on the right-hand side, then there's an attachment in that specific section. You can just double click or click on that paperclip and see that it opens, just to make sure that you've uploaded it correctly. So the index tab gets overlooked a lot, but I find it to be super helpful, especially when you're done or almost done. Just go through and just verify things in your application have been done the way that you want them to, and that they're complete. So we skip past the attachment. Now we'll come back to it, the attachment section. If there's anything required of you to attach and there wasn't a section or a place for it in the application, here's a good place for it. If you want to attach any supplementary information for this application, go ahead and put it here. If not, you don't absolutely have to put anything here. Once you're done with the entire application, remember we talked to you about being able to validate specific sections. Once you think you're finished, you can validate the whole section by clicking the Done button. If it says that there are errors in the application, you want to click on that red error button, and it will bring up in a pop-up window the errors that you have. Most of the errors have a resolution right there in the error box. Some of them do not, because they're really easy, and some of them might not, and you won't know how to do it, and that's where you want to get a hold of us. If you validate and there are no errors, it'll say all sections validated successfully. Then you have a clean application. It doesn't mean that it has all of the information you wanted to put in the application. It just means that there are no errors that eGrants has found. Okay, so here's a pop-up example of what the sample error messages might look like. Click the plus button, it'll give you more information about the error. And again, you can get a hold of us with any errors that you have. We can answer questions about how to resolve errors, but remember, we're not going to provide any help on what content should be included. It's not something we can do for RFPs. Once you're ready to submit, only the authorized official can submit the application. That person will want to go to grant application, print/submit application. Select the grant program, use the hamburger button in that top line, grant program. Agencies should self-populate. Click on the blue words anywhere in that middle on that blue banner there. It'll take you into the application. It should say work in progress or application entry work in progress. It means that it's still able to be worked on. Once you click on those blue words, it'll take you into a final review. That authorized official can go through all the sections of the application if need be. can validate it one more time to make sure that there are no errors. You're not going to be able to submit it if there are, but it's good to just validate it one more time. And then click the submit button. A confirmation message will pop up and say this action will promote the grant application to assign applications for review. That takes it out of your hands, submits it to the state of Michigan for the review process. So you cannot make any changes after you submit it. So please make sure that you're ready. After you've submitted it, or before if you want to, again, you can print that application out with or without attachments. If you hover over those PDF buttons, it'll tell you which one's which. Once we've gone through the entire review process, decided who will be funded, and the application comes back to you for final signature, again, the authorized official will be the one that goes to project director application status. Select the grant program, click find. You can view the contract, go through all of the sections, and sign the official document. So you'll click sign contract. It'll ask if you have the authority to sign a contract. If you click yes, then you have a legally binding agreement. You can print the agreement off there as well. Again, we are here Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30. It's just a couple of us at the help desk. This standard of promptness that says 2 days, that was back when we had first started. Now it's a half hour in most cases is the longest you'll have to wait, especially for user account activations. If there's anything that needs further clarification from program office, we'll make sure we include them, or you can include them first, and we'll work back and forth with them as closely as we need to make sure everybody gets everything they need. Give us your name, the agency you work for, the program you're working on, because there are several other programs that we're working with right now, just so that we can drill down to your specific need quickly. And so that in this case, I don't think there's a specific project, just the program, the HHAII. Give us a phone number with an area code, and even a time that we can reach you at, which is super helpful because we know you're working on other things, and what you're having a problem with. And you can email it right to the Leo eGrants help@michigan.gov. We also have a phone number, and maybe we can put this in the chat. It's 517-284-4007. I'll put it in the chat when I'm done talking, just so that everybody has it. But I know that's really lengthy. You can find this in the eGrants See Current Grants and go through this. That's a lot of information to retain, especially if you've never done an application in the eGrants system before. So we're happy to answer any questions. Again, we're happy for you to reach out to us in the help desk. That's why we have it. And if you haven't gotten a response relatively quickly, email us again. Just bug us until you get the answers that you need. We're happy to help. Sometimes it's busier. Sometimes you have multiple RFPs closing the same day, and we just don't get to things quickly. So pester us till you get what you need. And if we can't help you, we'll find someone who can.
Thanks so much, Michael. So we're gonna go over to Q&A now. Denise, I think, is gonna organize them for us. I just wanted to remind everyone that we are recording this, and this recording will be sent out to everyone that registered for the event. And it will also be posted on the webpage for the Housing Access for Justice Involved Individuals webpage on the Leo website. And then also, I know a lot of questions have come up, and Michael just went over a lot. So we'll try to get through as many questions as we can in the next 20 minutes. But whatever we don't get to, we will also, and everything that we do get to, all of the questions and all of the answers will be posted on an FAQ page as well, also on the website. So don't fret if we don't get to your question today. Oh, you're on mute.
Start with questions on eGrants since it's kind of fresh in everybody's mind. So one question is, I have already created and used my agency name for the My Login for business. What would I be doing differently for eGrants?
The My Login. What is My Login is not the eGrants system. So you want to make sure you're creating an agency profile for your agency, and then creating your specific user profiles. Double check to make sure someone hasn't created your agency profile in eGrants before you get started. Again, creating a second agency profile just creates problems that you don't really want to have. And then if you do see it there and you just want to make sure that you've gotten assigned, linked to that agency when you're creating your own specific user profile, just let us know when you've created it, or refer to the create user profile instructions in that See Current Grants. And if you want in a second here, I could pull that up, like kind of do a quick walkthrough on that also. Here, let's see. Let's do that really quick. Just can you all see it?
Yes.
Okay, if we go to the home screen, it's right over here without a red box around it. See Current Grants. And then this is the one we're specifically talking about here. I'll make this bigger. Go to user documents, and you have the RFP document. This has the information about this grant, how to register your agency, how to create your profile, how to assign agency users, how to start the application, all of those things. So all of those instructions that we talked about are all in here. The competitive grant instructions, this is that entire PowerPoint that I just went through. So you can refer to, if you're listening, going back and listening to this, you can pull that up and follow along. And then this is just a template for kind of an obligatory template. So that's how you would get to what you need to. I hope that answers the question.
All right, thank you. Next question, how long does it take for the activation approval in eGrams for new account users? How will we be notified that it is now active?
If you email us, I'll do it within 2 minutes. If you create the profile and then walk away, we go in 2 or 3 times a day and just check for inactive users and activate them. You'll get an auto reply from the eGram system that you have an active profile. But if you email me to activate your profile, I will email you back telling you that I've done it. So I prefer just tell me when you've done it. I'm in that inbox all day, every day. And so if you reach out to me, you're going to get a quick response and a quick activation.
All right, thank you. And I know you've addressed this, but the question is, are there character limits that we should be aware of?
Within user profiles, I don't think I've ever
Probably
seen somebody. Oh, go ahead.
I'm assuming within their proposal.
Yeah, the 5,000 character limit is the default. So unless you see specifically in the show/hide instructions that there's a different character limit, then the default character limit is 5,000 characters.
Okay, and can the project director or designee be assigned to multiple responsibilities at once in this program, or does every position need to be a different person?
That's an excellent question. So you can, I think that most programs are set up that if you put the same person's name in the contract application on the contacts section of the application, you're going to get an error message that you can't have the same person in multiple spots. So you'll want to fill in different names. As far as the functional roles in the assign user screen, only one user account can be assigned to one functional role. We do understand that if you have a small agency, there are not many people working on the grant, or just not many people working at the agency at all, that you may need to wear multiple hats. You will need to create a second profile. What I would do is maybe your Bob 123 profile is your project director. If you're going to have a second role, maybe you're going to be the financial officer, that you do Bob 123 FO financial officer, and then have us assign you to that. We really recommend that you have 3 people in all 3 roles. The separation of duties, the audit standard requirement that you don't have, the same hand in the cookie jar doing all these things. It prevents you from kind of raising red flags when it comes to people being able to do multiple things within the eGram system. But we do understand from time to time that it does happen where you have a small agency or just one person working on multiple things. Just know that if you're going to be doing 2 different, 3 different things, you'll need to create 2 or 3 different profiles.
Okay, and I think this is our last eGrams related question. We have submitted grants through eGrams in the past, but when I entered our FEIN number, it did not find our agency. Is there a reason for this? Are accounts deleted after a period of inactivity?
Accounts are not deleted. It could be something as simple as the dash and the Fed ID number, or just email the help desk right away, and I'll get to the bottom of that and help you figure it out. Sometimes it's that you were in egrams and DHHS and forgot, and it wasn't Leo. It's just in the wrong agency egrams, and so you'll have to create a new one.
All right, great, thank you. And now to some questions on the program. Sophie, is the $1,200 incentive bonus separate from move-in assistance?
So that $1,200 incentive bonus is just a suggested use for the incentive dollars. So it really is going to depend on how you want to design the incentive uses. I think it probably would be separate from other incentive uses because it's typically just a one-time sign-on bonus for the landlords if that's what you decide to do with it. But so yes, and it depends is my answer.
All right. Are local governments eligible to apply?
Yes, local governments are eligible.
Will standard renter trainings, financial literacy courses, and education on renting to JIIs be provided, or is this something the grantee will need to develop?
So I want to say that we can provide resources that already exist and share those resources with you for trainings and education materials. But we do want to see that you develop something that is tailored to your organization and the specific needs in your community. But keep an eye out on the FAQ page that we post for a more detailed answer to that. I want to make sure that we clarify that to the best of our ability.
Okay, great. Do the landlords have to live in the service area? If not, should they live in state?
So this is another one that I think we'll probably want to check on and get back to you. My inclination is to say that yes, we do want them to live in state at the very least, because we have heard some not so good stories about landlord scams and issues with landlords not living in state. And we want you to be able to have that relationship with them as the grantee to maintain that relationship with them. So I think at the very least, we want them to live in state and we want them to be able to maintain regular contact with you. But again, keep an eye on the FAQ page that we'll be posting.
All right, and please confirm that the funding is state funds, including
is.
the Michigan. Okay.
Yep, so it's state funds and the contribution from the Michigan Justice Fund. Yep.
All right. Our community has had a landlord risk mitigation fund for 5 years and works with JII. One thing we have seen that is really important to help with lease up of individuals and families is payments for rental insurance. Our private landlords are requiring rent insurance at lease up. Am I correct that this rent insurance payment is not an allowable expense for this grant?
I believe you are correct, but I want to double check on that and see if it doesn't make sense for us to do an exception. So again, keep an eye out for the FAQ page that we'll post.
Great. And can you clarify what you mean by new landlords? We currently work with landlords. Some were willing to work with JIIs than others. If the incentives are used to target the more resistant landlords, is this considered bringing in new landlords? Can we incentivize those who do help eliminate barriers as well, given we have not been able to offer incentives in the past?
So we do want to see the incentives mainly being used to bring in or recruit those resistant landlords. I think there was another question that we might get to that also touches on this. The idea is, it may be difficult to track landlords that may have rented or have changed their minds about renting to justice-involved individuals, but the goal is to really try to break down some of that resistance, to overcome the resistance that landlords are demonstrating to renting to this population.
Okay. And here's another question about the landlords. You mentioned attracting new landlords that have not rented to this population before. Landlords rent to a lot of people over the years who may have been justice impacted. Restricting this to those who have never rented is going to be difficult or near impossible, especially if they've been renting to the community for a long time. In rural areas where property is limited, this is restricting options even more. Further, there is no way to ensure or prove that landlords have never rented to someone just as impacted. Asking if we can partner with any landlord wanting to work with this population, regardless of previous history.
So yeah, so that's kind of getting to the last question as well. I think, again, we want to highlight or emphasize the need to work with resistant landlords. I recognize that that may be difficult in some situations if you already have landlords or relationships with landlords that are willing to rent to justice-involved individuals. But one of the main goals of this is really to try to build that portfolio of landlords that have not rented to justice-involved individuals before. And again, I know that I think you make a great point that it's difficult to really track or know for sure that they've never rented to a justice-involved individual before. The point is really, are you building relationships with landlords that have expressed resistance to renting to this population? And how are you able to deepen that relationship and overcome that resistance? And that may look like, working with some landlords that you've already worked with before and have not rented to this population, or maybe rented to them in the past and had a bad experience and now don't want to. I think what we want to avoid is providing this incentive dollars to landlords who are already on board with renting to justice-involved individuals, because we want to overcome that resistance. Hopefully that makes sense.
All right, great. Can grant funds be used to fund a new position to oversee this program?
The funds can definitely go towards salary. There's a limit on indirect costs, but it can go towards salary and benefits. You would just need to propose that in your budget and make sure it works out for how you budget out the incentives versus salary and benefits payments.
Okay. And another question, are we able to utilize the funding for transitional housing that is owned by the organization? Also, are we able to utilize the funding for the existing emergency housing assistance? So I did see this question if the applicant also is a housing provider, if they can still be eligible under this grant.
I'll have to confer and get back on that one. So check the FAQ page. I will say that, going back to the point about increasing the portfolio of landlords willing to rent to justice-involved individuals and breaking down that resistance. If you are already an organization that rents to justice-involved individuals, then it likely is a no, but we'll get back on that one.
Okay, and I just want to reiterate that this is being recorded, and we will share this out with everybody who registered for this webinar, and we will also post it on the website. So I just wanted to share that. There's some questions around the recording. Next question, can funds be used to incentivize repairs prior to move-in based housing inspection to expedite move-in?
That's another one that I want to double check on. I think that if it's going towards the landlord, it's possible, but I want to double check on that one and get back to you.
All right. The tracking of the participants and landlords, along with the training and educational components that are required, if these components are not maintained, would the person or landlord be removed from the program? And how do you suggest it be tracked? Is there an actual contractual agreement between the agency and the participants and landlords? Something they sign acknowledging their understanding of the expectations?
Yes, so we do expect that there is some sort of signed agreement between both the landlord and the service provider and the tenant and the service provider so that everyone is understanding of the program requirements. You don't have to have that completed contract agreement or signed form template in your grant application, but we do want to see in your grant application that you are thinking about, what that agreement entails or includes. And there's more information about that in the RFP. I would say in terms of tracking it and how that would be tracked and whether or not somebody is removed from the program if they don't fulfill that agreement, we expect that there are monthly, maintenance or check-ins with both the landlord and the tenant to ensure successful housing placement. I think it's going to kind of be up to your discretion based on your relationship with the landlord and how well, if somebody misses one check-in because of a personal concern or personal issue, I don't know that that would be cause for them to be terminated from the program. But if they are not following through on their agreement to provide safe housing or good quality housing to the tenant, then I think that that is something, or if they're not, complying with local or state housing codes, then that would be cause for termination from the program.
All right, thank you. Are landlord incentives the only allowable expense outside of indirect? Is there funding for staffing, such as case managers working with JII, or is all staffing expected to be covered by the utilizing no more than 10% of the grant for indirect costs mentioned in the RFP?
The 10% for indirect costs does not include staffing or salary costs. So those are separate.
Okay. The RFP lists a range of 10 to 40 landlords. How flexible is this range? Can you work with a lesser population?
Yes, those ranges are, suggestions that we'd like to see. But I think depending on your community, we realize that, especially in some rural communities, those numbers might be towards the smaller side or even lesser. So if, as long as we see an argument or the explanation in your grant application for how many people you plan to work with and why that will be bringing in, you'll be expanding the portfolio and helping folks access housing who would not otherwise be accessing housing without these incentives. I think that's appropriate.
Okay. And are there further detailed requirements related to background checks for participants? Example, out-of-state checks, specific registries?
Nope. There are no other, I think as long as the person has a criminal record that shows up on a background check that, would come up when they are applying for housing, that's what matters.
Okay. Just to clarify, these funds cannot be used to provide ongoing rental subsidy other than first month security deposit and/or in case of emergency. Is this correct?
Well, so again, the incentive use is it's up to you to design it however you think it would be best in your community. So if you think that it would be helpful to have a pool of money that somebody can dip into for rental support as they need it, and that's what you want to use it for, then definitely make the case for that in your application. We want to see creative ideas for how these incentives can be used to support folks in different community contexts.
All right. Can grant funds be used for outreach purposes to attract partners?
Do you want to answer that one, Denise?
Yeah, I would say no, because we'd want to see those partners in your application.
Yep, that makes sense.
Next question. My question is regarding the suggested use of an incentive to pay first month's rent and a security deposit. If the tenant moves out, that money is usually returned to the tenant. My understanding is that these funds are not to go directly to the JII. Does this suggestion create this problem?
Yep, so that is something that we've thought about, and in our I believe it's in the RFP, but if not, it's definitely something that we've thought about with the state attorney. And in that situation, the money would go back to the organization, to the grantee, to assist with continued housing placements. So it would not go back to the JII, but to the organization. I do want to note that we're at 1 o'clock, Denise, so I want to be
Mhm.
cognizant of time, everybody's time. So at this point, I think it's safe to say we will put the rest of the questions and all of the questions and answers, including those that we did not get to, on the FAQ page, which hopefully we'll be posting later this week. We will be updating that throughout, the grant application cycle. So the last day to submit questions is May 13th, and we'll make sure that the FAQ is updated entirely by May 14th, but we'll be posting and kind of updating it as we go. So be sure to check the webpage, and you can also email us with questions as they come up for you, or if you're not seeing the FAQ page or anything like that. And again, this recording will be shared out with registrants and also posted on the webpage. So thank you all for spending this time with us. Really appreciate all the interest in this application. And again, reach out either to us or the eGrams team if you have any questions. Denise, did I forget anything?
Nope, I think you covered it all. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone.